listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
Hey, what's going on? Long time no speak, so I hope you're all well, and thanks for checking out my show Straight to Video. As always, it's me, your host Rob Lane, and after a couple of weeks away, the show is back, and I'm thrilled to bring you a talk with someone who has become such a recognisable face in the horror world since appearing on our screens in glorious black and white in the role of Martin Lomax in 2011's Human Centipede 2, and later returning in a different guise in the third and final instalment of the stomach-churning franchise. Now, what is usually the case in people landing iconic roles in horror films, their real-life persona is nothing like what we see on screen. And today's guest, Laurence R. Harvey, is very much the same. Witty, well-spoken, and just a fan of intelligent cinema and popular culture. So it was great to have him on the show to talk all about his incredibly varied career, working on Saturday morning TV shows, his time as part of the Centipede movies, right through to his very busy work schedule as a voiceover artist releasing albums with Cadabra Records in the USA. This straight-to-video podcast is proudly presented to you in association with Affinity Photo, an incredible piece of photo editing software which I've been using for graphic design the past couple of years. Affinity Photo is used to create the podcast episode art where you see each week, and it's an extremely affordable alternative to other programs on the market, so please check them out over at affinity.serif.com. Now, not only is Laurence appearing as a guest on today's show, he'll also be heading down the motorway to visit our 80s video shop in Alfreton on Sunday the 15th of December to sign autographs and pose for photos. So if you'd like to come along, pop the 15th in your diaries and keep up to date on social media at 80s Video Shop. But right now, to whet your appetites, please enjoy my straight to video chat with Laurence R. Harvey. How are you, sir? Good to see you.
Good to see you.
How's your day going? All right.
Fine, except it's cold. Condensation in the bedroom windows. Had to open all the windows, and then
oh no!
And then obviously with the windows being open, you don't want to put the heating on. So literally just close the windows and put the heater on now.
We're getting to that time of year, aren't we? It's like, oh, it's finally here.
You've got to make a choice: condensation and black mold, or being warm.
Where are you at the moment? Are you up north?
Yeah, I'm based in Wigan. It's kind of handy for Manchester Airport, and with it being the west coastline, it's fairly easy to get to London and to Scotland as well. So
you're originally from the Wigan area, so still living in a similar place. I think was it Appley Bridge you was from originally?
Well, I grew up in Appley Bridge. I was born in Ormskirk, and then my parents moved to Appley Bridge when I was about 4 or 5.
How was it growing up there, like during the 70s and 80s? How much has it changed?
Well, it's heroin and crack rather than glue and heroin. That's the major.
Not as much Tipex these days.
A lot more vaping, yeah.
I think that's most small towns in the UK.
Yeah, no smoking, but all vaping.
And vape shops on every corner compared to Benson and Hedges billboards.
Yeah.
Could you have ever imagined having a career back then which would take you to like London and all over the world? As I guess small towns can sometimes make people feel trapped, and you have to have like big ambition and confidence to make that leap out of your comfort zone.
I knew that I wasn't going to stay in Wigan, and as soon as I could, I got out. Lived in London for like 14, 15 years. It's great for meeting people and the opportunities you get, but all your money just goes on living there. Like you can't get out and do anything, you know.
It's just like you're on the doorstep. It's kind of like a Hollywood kind of thing. It's just this little hub where people are right on your doorstep.
Yeah.
The internet just totally changed everything like that. You can do meetings like this face to face, technically.
You know, I work for Cadabra Records in America, and it's all emailing the stuff over, you know.
That's one thing that takes up a lot of your time now, because obviously such a huge presence in front of the camera, but this is something just behind the microphone, voicing their audio stories and things like that. How did that all come to fruition?
Basically, there was a local band, there is a local band called the Duke Street Workshop. Lee, who's behind that, wanted to do a couple of H.P. Lovecraft stories. We met in the local record shop, and he wanted me to do the spoken word element of that record. We did From Beyond and The Hound. And we were wondering if there was any interest in spoken word. And then we heard about this spoken word label starting up. And Cadabra, sort of the first record was a Lee Brown Coy stuff. And then we were going to focus on weird fiction. And then they announced The Hound. And we were thinking, well, that's all right. That's not out till January. Ours is coming out in October, so be out in front of them. But then pressing plant delays and stuff. So it ended up their version of The Hound and our version, The Tales of H.P. Lovecraft, ended up coming out within a week of each other in January. And then reviewers were often reviewing the two albums in the same section, or next to each other.
Was that almost like a blessing in disguise? Like good promotion for both of you, in a way, as long as they didn't prefer one more than the other?
The two were very different. I mean, Cadabra Records tend to like a sort of straightforward red story with a kind of musical background, whereas I think the Duke Street Workshop album is, like Jeff Wayne's musical War of the Worlds. The story's told as much through the music as it is through the actual narrative. That was more like the Duke Street Workshop album.
Was that a whole new territory for you, doing an audiobook format? Was that something you immediately felt comfortable with, or did it take some time to find your feet and grasp it?
Lee knew kind of what he wanted. I think we'd both grown up with those kind of Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing reading Edgar Allan Poe and The Invisible Man and stuff like that. So we both grew up with that. So I think Lee had a definite idea of how he wanted it to be.
Which has been your favourite one so far? Because you tied in with quite a few of them on Cadabra.
I always liked the Edgar Allan Poe ones, especially The Human Chair and Caterpillar, kind of because Rampo was an author I wanted to get Cadabra Records to release. That was kind of my suggestion. And Spurs as well, the Todd Robbins, which was the basis of the film Freaks. Those are the stories that I wanted to get on Cadabra Records because they are great horror stories, but unless you're aware of Edgar Rampo, you're not going to know much about them.
Do they give you much feedback when you send the stuff over, envisioning it a slightly different way, or is it normally first take gets it?
I try and make it a story somebody's telling you. A lot of the stories are sort of set in gentlemen's clubs, so I try and make it sound like that. But some of the stories, like The Human Chair, the actual story is a manuscript that somebody receives. It's somebody that admires this author writing to them and telling them this strange tale. So that's the kind of story I like to read or like to hear on record anyway.
You mentioned growing up hearing like Christopher Lee stuff and all this kind of thing, but when we grew up in like the 70s pop culture world, it was like dominated by the USA. It was such a big deal for us growing up in the UK, and particularly Star Wars. I think that had a big effect on you when you first saw it at the cinema.
Absolutely. I saw it at the ABC, but it was certainly in McGull. And there was an intermission halfway through, just as the Millennium Falcon's pulling into the Death Star.
Did you know what you was going in to expect at that time?
There'd been newspaper articles and stuff about the film and how it was so successful in America. It was definitely out before Christmas in America, and then we didn't get it until like February.
Yeah, I think it was like well into 1977 when America got it. And I think a lot of people say they saw it at Christmas, but I don't think it got like its full UK release until...
No, it was definitely January, February time.
They'd had it such a long time, so even though we didn't have internet, there was still that buzz.
Yeah. Well, I remember it being in the Sunday Times magazine, like before it had come out over here.
How many times did you see it?
Over the years, I've seen it quite a few times. But at the cinema then, I only saw it once because my dad refused to pay for it.
Who did you go with?
My dad, my sister, my brother would have been too young.
Did your dad enjoy it as much as you guys did? Because that was the thing, it crossed over generations. Everyone seemed to love it.
I think he enjoyed it. It's probably better than Benji, I suppose.
Benji, that's a throwback.
Benji was on a double bill with Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger when that came out in 77, the same year.
I think you've said in the past you wanted to see yourself as one of the Cantina aliens. Is that something that's still on the bucket list?
Not anymore.
No?
I did want to be one when I was growing up, yeah. When I was doing Saturday morning kids TV, I knew a few of the Jim Henson people, and one of them said I should get in touch with Henson's. Basically, they were telling me to get in touch because they were casting Muppets Treasure Island. I just never heard back from them.
We both grew up during like the video explosion at the beginning of the 1980s. What are some of your earliest memories of that time? Did you have a local video shop you would always frequent? I would imagine there'd been a main one in Wigan.
We didn't get a VHS player until 86, by which time the Video Nasties bill had come in and stuff. But I just remember every corner shop had a sort of section at the back where there'd be all these lurid covers and stuff. It's amazing how many of those films are out on Blu-ray now and are pretty terrible.
Someone said to me a while ago, it's like, what's inside that box? Your imagination created something as big as bigger than what the film could ever present to you.
Yes, yeah. And of course, it was kind of playground talk of, I saw her get her eyeball stuck on her stick. And I just remember like being told about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and it's so bloody and they put this woman on a hook and stuff like this. And I was thinking, wow, I've got to see that. And then obviously never got a chance until it was re-released in the cinemas in 92, I think.
Years and years after, because I first saw it when I was on holiday in America in like the late 80s, and even then it felt dangerous. This is the film I've heard about. So if you didn't get a video player till like 1986, did you go around mates' houses to watch films or anything like that? Or did you have access to see films in any way?
Sometimes round at mates' houses, but to be honest, it was still the age of the video library in 86.
Was you playing catch-up big time then?
Not big time, but it would be like the stuff that hadn't been on TV. That's what you'd focus on.
Did you recall any films you stumbled upon which would have a massive effect on your love of cinema?
There's films that I definitely remember hiring that I think are great films now, and that, like Iceman with Timothy Hutton, a sort of intelligent look at reviving a dead Iceman.
When did that come out? That's totally passed me by.
84.
I'll have to track that one down.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in ages.
What do you recall about that whole Video Nasties censorship battle of the day? Because you yourself, you'd have something of a similar encounter several decades later with the Human Centipede 2 and the reaction from the BBFC.
When Star Wars came out, I started getting like Starlog and Starburst and then Fangoria and stuff. Starburst at the time was covering a lot of the Video Nasties and the tabloid campaign about it, giving the arguments against it. So I was following it quite readily at the time, and interested in what things were being cut and what things were being objected to. So yeah, as you said, like living through that time and experiencing it that way. And then developing this kind of academic interest in censorship. It was very ironic to then be in a similar kind of furor with the Human Centipede 2.
So many years later, is that almost a good thing at that point because you've got like the internet on your side at that time and it generates a buzz around it even more so where we really need to see this film now when someone's taking such a stand against it? Is that almost a good thing when it happens nowadays?
It's a good and bad thing because it was passed uncut in Australia at the same time as the BBFC objected to it. So they were advertising that it was banned in the UK, which wasn't banned, it was just refused certification. Because it had been refused certification, and obviously being covered in the press in Australia, then Family Voice Australia, a Christian group, sort of then objected to it being passed uncut in Australia. So it had to go back to the Video Review Board. So when Human Centipede 2 was released in Australia, there was like 2 weeks where it could be shown uncut. And that's when I went over there to help promote it. And then it would be submitted to the video board for reassessment. And I think they literally 13 seconds of cuts. And it was literally penis cuts. The 2 or 3 scenes where you can see a penis.
You can see that on general TV now on Naked Attraction.
I know.
I love what you said earlier about when these films get this kind of aura about them. You describe it as schoolyard currency, which I think's a fantastic term, where like the hype and mystique is generated from word of mouth between friends, and that really builds excitement for a film, especially when you shouldn't be watching it, like when kids underage, like they've got to see it.
Yeah.
What was your family's reaction when you said you wanted to go into the film industry? Was everyone around you supportive, or would they have preferred you go down a more standard route of occupation?
Well, I never announced that I was going into the film industry. Went to art college, and then during art college I was working with other artists, and then when I came out of college I started getting work in TV through some of the artists that I'd worked with. Then it became, well, TV's good because we can see you on TV and we know you're getting paid.
Right, okay.
As opposed to being a starving artist and moving down to London. And so at least we know you're sort of getting some money in occasionally.
You mentioned you got to work initially on children's TV, particularly Saturday morning shows.
I worked with an artist called Stephen Taylor Woodrow in the late 80s, early 90s when I was at college. And then when I came out of college, he was already doing like Saturday morning stuff in Maidstone with Number 73 and then What's Up Doc. Him and his creative partner Pete Cox, they created loads of characters for What's Up Doc, and then they'd bring me in to play Laurence the Gnome or a little cheesy ranger that gets smacked about with a halibut or something. So I started doing the odd bit on What's Up Doc alongside Frank Sidebottom. And then Some of the production staff from What's Up Doc were drafted in for the third season of Parallel 9, and Peter Cox went on to be one of the writing partners. And so wrote a character and brought me in to do that character.
That was such a big format back then, like a 3-hour plus show with like cartoon sketches, music and guests. I mean, that's long gone now.
Yeah, but I mean, What's Up Doc was specifically about Warner Brothers as well, because it was the animated Batman UK premiere, Animaniacs UK premiere, and then the old Warner Brothers cartoons and stuff.
I was looking at some old clips of Parallel 9 this morning, and on the very last episode, you actually introduced the band Let Loose, who I play for now.
Oh, right, okay.
So that's when there was like doing the promo stuff. There was just the three of them. And their new singer, Matthew, he was actually on the show as well. He was in a band called Bad Boys Inc. at the time.
All right, yeah.
He's actually on that same episode. And there you are, the little green man introducing Let Loose. I was like, holy shit. So later on this afternoon, I'm going to have to send him some screen grabs of it. So I was speaking to this guy who introduced you all them years ago. That's bizarre. I would imagine those kind of shows are like very spontaneous and fly by the seat of your pants, or is it pretty structured behind the scenes?
The thing is, because there's all these different strands, the sitcom kind of element has to be kind of structured. And then if it's going to involve a lot of people, we tend to record that as if it's live, but record it like the day before. So as live means leaving in any kind of slight slip-ups, or if you do the wrong line or something, sometimes they'll leave that in to make it look as if it's live.
Feels all right for a Saturday morning.
The actual organisation of it is where the cameras are moving to and so on, and you've got to fit in around that.
What was you doing in between that time and before like the Human Centipede? Was you still living and working in London?
Yeah, I was still living and working in London until 2006. So 94 was Parallel 9, and then got an agent, and then was doing short films and, you know, adverts in the US and throughout Europe, and one or two in the UK. Went to art school and specialised in performance art. So I was still doing performance art stuff on the art scene, not getting any money for it, and using the TV to sort of pay for the art stuff. And then somebody that I'd met through some performance art at the Avignon Festival, he came to London as a producer and was working at the Gate in Notting Hill. So then I started getting like theatre work, and then worked with Ken Campbell and his daughter Daisy on The Warp, 24-hour play about alternative thought and society in Britain from the 50s through to the mid-70s. It was basically theatre and performance art. Then I went back to college in 2000, did an MA in art and performance theory, or history and theory of art and performance.
You became incredibly well known in your role of Martin Lomax in the film Human Centipede 2, which you mentioned earlier, back in 2011. Did I hear your agent actually turn down the audition?
Yeah, he thought it was porn.
That's sold to him very strangely then.
I did wonder why he thought it was porn. He said, these people have been in touch. And I looked on their website and it said, entertainment for adults, Amsterdam. Okay. I said, well, I wonder why they've got in touch with me. And it's like, because I'd done a play called The Man with the Absurdly Large Penis at the Young Vic. So I thought, well, you know, it's typecasting.
We need this guy.
Yeah, but no. But when I asked him what the title was, then obviously I recognised it, because the Human Centipede, the first one, had been on at Fright Fest, and I've read the reviews from that, and Fantastic Fest in Austin.
So he's like, call him back.
Yeah.
The audition was held in Soho, I believe. I mean, could you ever imagine what that day would have led to and have such an impact on your career? Do you ever think about moments like that, as in today is going to be a pretty eventful day, if that makes sense?
You can't think of it like that. Everything you think is going to be a success probably isn't. And then the ones you don't think are going to be a success are.
Do you ever think back later on, like the sliding doors moment?
I don't let myself think that way.
I probably overthink sort of too much.
No, the only thing you can do is react to what life throws at you and try and be ready for anything and ready to adapt. If you'd said I was end up reading horror stories from Japan on a record for an American company, I wouldn't have predicted that when I was in A-levels wanting to be a comic book artist, you know. So yeah, I knew the first film, people either loved it or hated it. And that, to me, indicated something special. When we saw the film on the day of the audition, it didn't blow me away, but I sort of really dug how there was all these kind of high art and lowbrow references at the same time.
How many of you were watching it on the day? Because you say you saw saw it on the day of the audition. Was the other people who were auditioning for the roles watching it at the same time as you?
Some that were auditioning for roles and some that were being invited for interview for crew. So, I mean, I remember the woman that played my mother, Mrs. Lomax. She was there with a friend. I remember there was some of the people that ended up being on the special effects team were in there as well.
Did you and the creator, Tom Six, immediately hit it off? Because you're not far different in ages, similar kind of ages, I think.
We hit it off. I mean, he's a bit younger than me, but it was kind of like in the audition, because there was no script. So he was literally taking me through the entire film, scene by scene. And I was going, oh, yeah, that's just like Society. Oh, that's just like All Night Long too, where the guy that's picked up on turns and goes, oh yeah. I could see elements that kind of related. And so we sort of got on like a house on fire, and the audition went on for like 45 minutes or something. But I really liked Tom and Alona. I thought, well, I'm probably not going to get it because it's the main part, but I'd like to play the neighbour or something.
How long after was it when you got the call?
It was a couple of weeks, relatively quick, considering they weren't going to be filming. It's like February and they were going to be filming in June. So relatively quick, but, it wasn't kind of the next day.
Am I right? Did the film premiere at Fantastic Fest in Austin?
Yes. Yeah.
How was it watching it in that setting with an American audience and seeing their reaction? Because it's a very British-looking film.
Yeah. We'd seen it at a cast and crew screening in London. And I was really impressed with how it kind of physically made me feel. So I was excited to see an audience react to it. And yeah, everyone seemed to be laughing in the right places and being grossed out in the right places. But, I knew it would divide audiences, and it did as well. Some people hated it and some people loved it.
Mission accomplished right there.
Yeah.
I love how each of the films have their own identity, yet are all part of one big vision. The first with its European feel, part two, like we say, very British, whilst the third film took things to the USA with this huge blast of colour and scale. How was it for you going over there to film that after doing the second one? A total reversal in location.
Yeah, completely different vibe because, the second one is a relatively small cast and crew. We all kind of knew each other and got on. And then with it being in the prison and with being like 150 extras, and generally a larger central cast as well. And then there were some egos because it's America.
How was Eric Roberts to work with on set?
He was great. He was just very laid back, very cool. Just turn up and doing bebop to relax just before doing the actual take. And then, he was fine.
How long was you over there for that shoot?
I think it was like 4 weeks that I was there.
How is your relationship with America? Is it somewhere you enjoy going and visiting and promoting things?
Yeah, I like it, but I don't like being there for too long. 4 weeks, I was ready to come home at the end of that 4 weeks.
Whereabouts was that the third part shot?
It was in and around LA.
Was that your first time out on the West Coast?
No, I'd been out and shot a series of adverts for AT&T in Universal Studios. That was about 95. So yeah, it was a good, almost 15 years later,
Do you think we're ever going to see Tom Six's film? Is it the Onania Club get a release, as it don't seem to be able to get a distributor?
Occasionally some talk bubbles up and then it sort of dies down again. The thing is, I think because of the way Tom finances his films with private investors, he's got to get a decent sized release at the cinema to then give a big enough return to his investors. But nobody wants to release it at the cinema, so the only people that are interested in putting it out are relatively small scale Blu-ray labels, So it's not even been picked up by Netflix or whatever,
I guess that's the scary proposition these days as well, because as soon as it's out there in any format, it's just going to be everywhere for free.
Yeah.
So that's the scary thing of holding it back. Because as soon as that thing leaks, everyone who wants to see it will probably find a way of seeing it, which eliminates ticket sales and, like I say, Blu-ray sales as well. It's not like you can't get a distributor because people don't want to see it, because there's obviously going to be people who want to see it.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's like whether he makes a massive loss on it and releases it through a small label, or he does it himself, like he did with the trilogy edited together.
Your part in these films has forever cemented you in horror movie history. How does it feel knowing you're perhaps some young horror fans' early introduction to the genre, like we had with the likes of the Nightmare on Elm Street or Halloween films?
I'm not sure it's their introduction to horror. Probably the thing that scarred them.
It's that nasty film, like, I watched it once, I don't fancy going back there again.
It had the same playground currency as Texas Chainsaw Massacre did for us. the TikTok generation now,
Have you seen it? Have you seen it? You got to see this. Got to at least add it to your list and see it at some point. One of those kind of films. Are you meeting younger people at conventions at all? Or do you get any kind of feedback that way?
Yeah, well, in America, you get like 6-year-olds.
Wow.
Yeah, I've seen your film.
Have you done many conventions in the US? Do many opportunities come up?
When the film came out, I did about a year and a half I did about 12 conventions, and then it sort of died down, and then I've just done one or two recent years.
Met any interesting characters also doing sign-ins at those?
The thing is, I'm not, like, if it was like a director or something, I'd be interested, but there's very few actors that I really want to meet. There's actors that I like Bill Moseley and Sid Haig. Sid was absolutely lovely. Bill was great. Bill and Sid kind of took me under their wing. Barbara Crampton was a joy to be around. She's an absolute lovely lady. So, when I started out, I met some really nice people. I think at conventions, there's a lot less. Like I was saying with Human Centipede 3, there were some egos on set. In conventions, you don't really get that, other than, say, the price or how much you mingle with the crowd. You're all guests.
Kind of in closing, we've touched on like the whole video thing quite a bit, but just to kind of wrap things up, I'd love you to time travel a little to a Friday night. I'm going to say in like the late 80s, early 90s, and you're heading to the video store in Wigan, maybe one of those little corner shop ones. What movie soundtrack would you have on the Walkman, and what 3 tapes would you rent for the weekend?
Oh, right, God, right, okay. Well, I mean, if it's the 90s, so I was at art school, so it's a kind of bit more esoteric choice of video rentals. Soundtrack-wise, it would either be, the classical music from 2001 or the RoboCop theme.
Good one.
That main theme from RoboCop was like the Raiders of the Lost Ark theme. It was something you came out of the cinema, sort of. And what 3 films? I mean, in the 90s, obviously, at art school, it would have been weird Canadian art house stuff like I've Heard the Mermaid Singing and probably Twin Peaks or some other David Lynch film.
What did you think of the Twin Peaks: The Return?
Loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was the best TV series ever. It was everything that the first couple of series should have been,
I had no idea what was going off for most of it. And I was like, Cooper's going to come back eventually. And it wasn't all right to the end. It's like, it just kept you hanging on.
Yeah. But, at the time, it was so big amongst people I hung out with anyway.
Such an interesting crossover as well. Because it appealed to that art crowd as well. But it was also very much mainstream as well.
Oh, yeah. In the early 90s, there was that, late 80s, early 90s, there was that kind of crossover thing happening. It's like Vic Reeves doing his sort of cabaret in a pub across the road from Goldsmiths Art College, then sort of takes it on the road and it gets picked up by TV for Vic Reeves' Big Night Out.
Yeah, how does something get that big?
Well, I mean, the first series was like quite small, small audiences, but everyone talked about it. And so it then got repeated very quickly and became really big and mainstream,
Very rare you get stuff like that now. Everything's so fragmented, whether it be music and things like that. For something to explode like that nowadays, I don't know if that's even possible.
Especially something that's so esoteric in a way, because I work a lot with Sean Reynard, who does QTV, Quentin Smyers. He's got a certain level of success on YouTube, but it's not a massive thing. And people that like him are the kind of niche. Done like a video for a band on Ghostbox label. It's that kind of level of, at least you can access it, but there is a democratization in accessing it. But I think the culture generally is a lot more conservative in terms of what's acceptable. Another video I would have hired from the video shop would be Evil Dead 2. I'd seen Evil Dead 1 at the cinema on a double bill after the court case about Evil Dead.
So how was it seeing Evil Dead 2? Like everything just ramped up?
First one, I was sort of very disappointed. So I'd heard so much about it, and then it's just plasticine stuff. But then Evil Dead 2 was fantastic. I loved all the references to Hong Kong films and stuff.
I remember just seeing stuff in Fangoria leading up to it. It's like, where's this going to go? And we haven't got Evil Dead 2 at the video shop. It's one which I do actually want to get. It looks great in that Palace Pictures box. So I'm always on the lookout.
I've got a VHS of it somewhere. If I can dig it out, I might bring it along.
Big thank you to Laurence R. Harvey for spending some time chatting with me on today's podcast. The Human Centipede movies are those strange, unique films which I think a lot of people have judged before they've even seen them, but there's a lot to unpack from them and well worth your time. I think I'll be diving back in to revisit them just before Laurence makes his appearance at our 80s video shop in Ofton, Derbyshire, just 10 minutes from junction 28 of the M1 on Sunday the 15th of December, so we really hope some of you can join us for that from 12 noon until 4 p.m. So that's it for this week's episode of the podcast. So until we chat again, make sure to always be kind, please rewind and unwind, and I'll speak to you all real soon.